All right, so within this area right here, your action safe, title safe fall under this icon. So within my screen, if I turn that on that, select action title safe, you'll see that it gives you those lines on your screen. They're just guides, they don't print or anything else, but they're that visual reference to know where you want to keep, to allow you to keep track of your edges. Generally, try to keep your type inside of the second line for HD content. The inner measurements take into account CRT displays. The ratio on those is generally 4:3, 4:3. HD is 16:9, which is what we've been working with up to this point, and we're going to continue that. To be honest, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to the CRT size anymore. It seems like most displays are HD. But if you do need to keep track of that, that's what the inner square is. So bring those up, and you can use those to keep track of your edges and where you want to keep your type at. One other item that's under there is a proportional grid. And we talked about working in grid structures. Proportional grid will actually turn off the title and action safe. But here's a basic grid structure that After Effects has built in. You can create your own grids, bring them in. I know people that just have a collection of Illustrator files that they mark out different grids they work with. Bring those in, lock them as a layer, and work to those. But you can bring up a grid from that same location, or proportional grid. So just going to turn on the action and title safe. All right, so that's kind of the first thing. So I'm just going to close all these. All right. So I'm just going to create a composition. And I'm just going to create a series of 16:9 compositions, about 10 seconds apiece. I'm going to name it, because I don't know what it's going to be. So before anything else, whenever we animate type, there is one thing that you shouldn't. So the type tool you'll find up here, and then I'm working within a standard layout. Actually, I should probably switch to if I switch to review. Your character and paragraph panels fall over here. They work just like they do in any other Adobe app. Point size, letting, kerning and tracking. So basics of type, if you don't know, just sort of briefly hit the beginning of it. So fonts, we reference in point size for their physical size. Letting is the amount of space between baselines. So if I've got two lines of type, let's do this. Do that again. Letting is the amount of space, the distance between the baselines, which are where in this case, where the capital letters sit, are kind of that imaginary line. And you can close that up and open it up with leading. Tracking and kerning. Tracking is a space between your text. Open and close that. Tracking is the word overall, the space between the letters and the word overall. Kerning is the space between your individual characters. So if you've got a typeface like let's see. Like Super Clarendon, for instance, has some kind of gappy extra spaces between some of the characters. If you tap the Option key and hit the left and right arrow keys, you can adjust the space in the kerning. So you can adjust, you know, the look of your type that way on a general level. And you can animate those, but we'll look at some different ways of doing that. So just very quickly, the basics of the type panel. So I've got some text. But I'll flush left, right over here. So we can set type and set keyframes for it within our timeline to start with. So if I type the word set, and if I open my text up, open the text section, look at source text. If I set a keyframe for that, move ahead to a second. Move ahead, let's try that again. Move ahead to a second. Another second. When I play that back, it'll simply cycle through the different changes in my text. You can't do a whole lot with that aside from, you know, change properties and that kind of thing. The keyframes on those, if you notice, are square, so you really can't ease those, blend into them at all. But just know that you can do that. I mean, you can make different I could change the color on that. Come out here, maybe I remove the color, but I add a white stroke. Sort of change the settings on those. Maybe we get out of here, it's white, and then I move out to another keyframe. cycle between different properties. So just know that you can do that. And maybe I can, I've had use for this kind of a thing before, cycling between colors quickly, that sort of thing. It's a fairly easy way to do it. But usually when you animate type, you're going to want to do something a little more dynamic with it than just changing text. So I'll just name that. So we'll just create a new comp. And say set a little bit of text, all caps. Let's see. Center that. So if we take a look down in our text panel, we've got a regular transform that we're used to. And we can obviously, we can animate position, sort of bring text in that way. Change our scale. Maybe back here it starts at 50. Bring it up here to 120. So anything any transform property like we've been working with that we apply is going to affect the word overall as a single unit. It's not really taking into account the fact we got different characters or anything else. It looks at it as simply, it could be a rectangle for all the transform tools care. And it's it's an okay way to move stuff in and out of frame. So you can do all the same things with that you can do with any other shape. Move it in, you can run them along a path, any number of things like that. But let me undo all of those. So I'm going to do just a very simple, I'm going to do this two ways. Let's duplicate that, turn that one off. So this one I'm just going to set at 2 seconds, that's where I want it to live. Set a position on it. And I'm just going to slide it down just a little bit. Let's do it again. Position that, slide this back. Just going to slide it down. So I get that. And we'll affect the opacity. We'll do being slow today. Let's change our resolution down to half. So it's kind of easing it up in. You can apply. Ease that in. Create kind of a nice effect that way. The only problem with animating it this way is that if I want to take and move this to a different spot on my screen, I've set position keyframes already. So I've got to move, kind of wrestle with those. I can accomplish the exact same thing within the type element itself. I'm just going to turn that one off and turn this one back, turn this one on. If I look inside of the text option here within my timeline, you'll see that there are a variety of other options here. There's my source text. But if I come over here, and this is where it gets a little bit, you don't really expect some of these things to be where they're at. Within my text there, within my text option, within my type layer, come over here, there's an animate arrow. And if I click on that, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of different things that I can animate, different properties. So in the first one I did, I animated position as well as opacity. So I'm going to start by selecting position, and you'll see that it adds this new item within my type called an animator. And I can change the name of that if I want to. If I, select it, hit the return key, I can change that. I'm going to leave it alone for now, and I can affect the X and the Y simply by sliding those items. So if I slide that down, so my center mark sort of shows my baseline in this case. I can slide that down just below. I'll start off, I'll keyframe that. And I can come across to 230. And I could slide this back up to 0 and keyframe that. So I've accomplished the same thing that I just had. And if I want to add my opacity into that, come down here to the animator. So I added this animate option. I can also, within the animator, there's an add arrow. If I select that, I can select a different property. So I can add opacity into that. And I'll set opacity here to 0. Set a keyframe, 3 seconds. Set it to 100. And I've accomplished the same basic animation that I had. With the difference being that with this one, I can copy and paste this, change my point size. Maybe I offset that a little bit. Paste it again, bring it down here, change my point size. And I've got that same animation that I just created, but it's all contained within that text layer. So I don't have to wrestle with my keyframes, where I changed or set position keyframes before on this block. These are completely mobile, so I can move those around if I need to. That's one benefit. So the second one would be the real magic in, and let's see, I'll just get rid of those. And I really don't like that. All right. So while I can set properties that way. The real work is done inside of this item right here called a range selector. And this is kind of where playing around starts to be valuable. What this gives us is, actually, I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to delete mine. Actually, let's do this instead. Turn that off. Create a new layer. Just sort of center that up. Animate, we're going to change the position. And, all right, so open that range selector up. So I can change, I'm going to actually change the position of my type. So I want to have this type drop in. So I want my type to start off up here. I'm going to drop it into the middle of the screen. And I'm going to do that by adjusting the position of that type. And I'm not going to set a keyframe with it at all. That's going to be my starting point. But if I come up here and take a look at these range selectors, I've got start, end, and offset. So start and end refer to the range of characters that are going to be affected at any given time. Offset, if I slide that, will offset some of that position. So if I slide that across, you can kind of see how that works. I find, especially with something like a drop-in, I find offset to be a little more valuable. And that's what I'm actually going to animate. So I'm going to start at a second. That offset is set to 0. Come across to 2 seconds. Raise it up to 100. And now when I play through that, it just drops those all in one character at a time. And I can still make adjustments to my, maybe I want to really open up the tracking on that. And it just kind of drops it in and plunks it in there. So coming back down here to take a look at this a little bit more, there's also an advanced section. So if I open that up, I can affect this. My range selector will affect it right now based on characters because that's the way it's set by default. You can select words, lines, depending on the type of text that you've got. But it kind of just sort of plunks that in right now. I can go down, and I don't know why they name them ease high and ease low. It's basically easing in and easing out. Same concept we looked at with setting keyframes. And if I set those both to 50, and play back through. Maybe I raise this one a little bit. Drop that one down. We can sort of affect how that works. And we can still apply easing to our individual keyframes as well. So I can select that end one, ease into it. And as we get closer to the end, it slows the motion down. You can also stack these, so I'm going to name this drop-in. And they've got eyeballs just like everything else does, so I can turn that one off if I want and try a different, say I do the scale this time. So I can set my scale to I'm just going to do my horizontal or my Y scale. So say I set that down to 0. And use my range selector then to, actually let's do this. Let's go back into advanced. The shape, it uses shapes to kind of affect the text. So by default it uses a square, but I'm going to switch that to ramp up. And then again, this is kind of where playing around with these, kind of learning what they do is valuable. So if I set this to ramp up, I'm going to set my offset to -100 in order to get that to all go away. And if I come over here to about 3 seconds, change my offset to 100, that'll give me a little more of a gradual kind of a reveal on that text. And it's all animating out. My center point is at the bottom of that text. So it's all animating out from the very bottom. So let's call this my scale animator. I can also stack these. So if I select another animate, I'm going to affect the center point this time. And if I bring this across, I'm going to raise the position of my center point. And then go back to my text and pull it back up to kind of be on center. And now you notice whenever I scale across there, I'm scaling out of the middle of my text as opposed to the bottom of my text. So that's kind of a nice slow scale effect to reveal text. I can add, let's see, let's add see, within my scale animator, got scale. I'm going to add an opacity as well. And set it down to 0. So when I start scaling these, they kind of fade in at the same time as well. A little more subtle. And maybe I add a blur into that. So now I'm fading it in, sort of blurring it as well, giving it a bit of a blur. So we just kind of stack our effectors within that, and we can get some much more kind of refined text effects. That works fairly well. And just like my others, I can adjust my type however I want. I can change it from Oblivion to my name. It'll affect it all the same way. So, like I said, you can save these as presets as well. So you get something you like, you've kind of done all this work, figured it out. If you select not the type itself, but I'm just going to select, actually let's change that to anchor point. If you select all of these, go up to effects or animation, you can save those as an animation preset. So save as an animation preset. And call it ramp fade in. It'll save it to a folder on your computer for your own user presets. Save that. And now when you go back to the effects menu, animation menu, browse presets or recent presets, there's your ramp fade in you just made. Fade up and in is another one I've got that I made. And you've got that to use on other effects. So consider within your text animation, you identify a few key animation styles. You'll probably animate text in a variety of different ways, but maybe there's a few key ones that you want to reuse throughout. Use the text animators to create those, save them as presets, and then you kind of save yourself time as you move on. Ramp in, I can come over here to effects and presets. Under animation presets, you'll now have a user presets. Double click on that, and it'll apply that effect wherever you've got your playhead in the timeline. So you can reuse those. They're really, I mean, there's a million tutorials online that talk about text, animation presets, that kind of thing. Take a look at them, you know, kind of play around with them. And just like anything, you know, you can stack other different effects on top of those, and like we did with the fractal noise last week. And I think those are kind of, using them that way, they're more flexible within your animation. So what's even better is it really only applies that effect, so you can still even go in and modify that effect if you need to. Change its timing, that kind of thing. So I'm not going to go super deep into a lot of those, but work around with, you know, I mean, play around with them, get used to them. I could have, the same way I put the, you know, I put the opacity and the blur inside of this range selector. I could have created separate animators for those, be able to turn them on and off easier. Actually, to be able to turn them on and off. So, a variety of ways to kind of build that stuff out. Let's see. So like I said, there are a bunch of presets that you can work with, at least use as starting points. I can't type. There. And if we come over to our effects and presets, take a look at, there's a set of text presets, animate in, out, some different blurs, curves and spins. Just kind of, let's see what dust double does. Apply that. Interesting, but you know, like I said, the bigger benefit isn't necessarily that it's kind of clunky. I don't really like what that does. Most of these presets aren't very refined that way, but you can, maybe there's something you like particularly about that, how it's put together. Open that up and see what they're doing. I mean, we've got a tracking amount in there, tracking type, rotation. It's using a selector called offset. So there's some different things that it's doing there. Take a look at those, kind of pick them apart. If I don't like that, I can dump it. Take a look what they got in blurs. Evaporate seems like it could be cool. It's kind of nice. Again, open those up and see what they're doing. It's just blur and opacity like I'd done, and scale like I'd done before. But Yeah, it's still just that offset. So, use those as starting points. Use them to kind of learn. I mean, the more frustrating thing I find with them sometimes is that there are times when offset works just great, but start and end are a better solution. So, all right, toy around with those. Just know that those are there. I prefer not to see you use them stock. Apply your own changes to them and effects, but they're there as a starting point, so you might as well use them. All right. So let's get another comp. So I had seen a variation on this a while back I thought was kind of cool. So, all sorts of different things we have available for type. What do I want? Find something nice and blocky. Let's do this. Up. And I'm going to start with a block of type. So we looked at masking as well last week. I want to try something with that too. So I've got this block of type. Let's just center it up to our space. And I'll leave it white. And I'm just going to kind of copy that and paste it a few times right into the same spot. Turn off all those, start with my first one. So with my type selected, if I grab one of my shape tools, I can mask out different areas. But if I just keep drawing, I can make this have any number of looks that I want it to. So I got 4 masks in there, or 4 rectangles. And I'm just going to drag this in so that it's only on screen for a bit. Move up to my next one, turn that one off. I'll move up to my next one, turn it on. I'll pull it in as well. Come on. Oh. Change the color of that. Blue. Maybe I'll scale that up just a little bit. And within this, I'll do a different set of masks. And the idea being that and kind of cycle between these different effects. This one I change to green. Delete my masks and create kind of a jittery type effect. There. Bless you. So, different masking effects, different things you can do with your text. So those are some of the things you can do with your type. I mean, you know, animate them in a number of ways. Bring other elements into them to work with it. You know, with this assignment, it's not strictly animating the type. It's any other elements you want to bring into it as well. So, you know, consider the title sequences that we looked at, all of that kind of stuff.